Welcome to the review for the Prehistory Exploration and Colonization test. Here are some key ideas you're going to have to know and understand for the test tomorrow. You're going to need to know how to define prehistory. You're also going to need to know, when did prehistory end in Georgia and who ended it? You need to know, what are the three cultures, prehistoric cultures, of Georgia? You need to know how the Native Americans got to North America. You know they came over from Asia, but how did they get here? Remember, there's the Bering Strait. They came over during the Ice Age when that was a land bridge, when they were connected closer. Next, you need to know, what kinds, or what do you call evidence used in archaeology? What are the items like weapons and bones and furniture and those items? What are they called? Those are called artifacts. Those items are called artifacts. You need to know why, or the main reasons why the Mississippian tribes disappeared. Spanish came in, they brought diseases, there were lots of issues with starvation. The Mississippians were not constantly staying in the same area. They were moving, they were looking for food. If there was not food available, they had to move on. You would also find that tribal warfare. Mississippians was not one big group. They were different tribes within that group. You also need to know the types of prey or animals hunted of the Paleo-Indians. Remember, this is back during the Ice Age. So you're going to have mastodons, bison, sloths. Those are going to be the types of animals they're hunting, large game animals. You're also going to want to know what an atlatl is. Sorry. And who used it first. So the Paleo-Indians, obviously, they were using that at the beginning. You also want to know, when was the bow and arrow introduced? During what culture? So during the woodland culture, a bow and arrow was introduced. So you need to understand how that connects to the weapons. Make sure that you're using your chart. Review that chart, your Native American chart. You also need to know how you knew there was a presence of religion. How did you know that religion was evident, that they believed in a type of God, that they believed that there was an afterlife. Okay? How do you know that now? In today's culture, in the modern culture, the idea of funerals would be an indication that afterlife is believed in, or you want to submit to a higher power, that idea of religion. And you know why there are limited paleo sites in Georgia? Remember, the Paleo Indians, they were nomads. They didn't constantly stay in one place. They went where the food was. And obviously, if they carried everything with them, there'd be very limited artifacts available for that. You understand why the Native Americans started settling in permanent areas. Well, why would you? If you no longer have to travel to find your food, if you can make your food there, then obviously it's going to be a lot easier. You need to understand why the use of pottery was so significant. The purpose of pottery changed everything. You were able to cultivate and store food. You were able to, by being able to do that, you could stay in one area a longer time because you could collect more food and store it and it would last longer. You need to know where did Columbus think he was when he landed in the Caribbean? Obviously, he called them the Indians, so he thought he was in India. You need to know who sponsored Columbus. He was an Italian explorer who went to Portugal, and they said that they didn't need an explorer at that time. They weren't looking to expand. And so he went to Ferdinand and Isabel in Spain, and they finally sponsored him. You need to know what is the Northwest Passage. The Northwest Passage was a water route to the Far East. That's what everyone was looking for. Portugal found it first, and everyone's looking for a different way to go. You need to know who the major colonizers of the New World are. You need to know that France, Spain, England, Portugal, those were major colonizers of the New World. You need to know who explored Georgia looking for gold. Hernando de Soto. You need to know who discovered the Fountain of Youth. Who was credited as being the first to sail around the world. What was the biggest impact the Spanish had on Native Americans? You need to understand how religious conversions helped the Spanish make the natives more supportive of the new colonies. You need to understand what was established by the Catholic Church in the New World. You need to know what European nation claimed Florida. Obviously, that would be Spain. You need to know what Britain claimed. That'd be the East Coast, anything north of Florida. Remember, Hernando de Soto came to Georgia, looked for gold, wasn't there, left. You also need to know who came and tried to start a colony before James Oglethorpe. And that would be Robert Montgomery, Sir Robert Montgomery. He wanted to create the group of Azilia south of Savannah. That was his thing. Understand how De Soto's journey through Georgia changed Native Americans. I mean, what did he do? How did he change them? Well, obviously, he brings lots of diseases. That's going to completely wipe them out. It totally affects them. You need to know, what did James Oglethorpe do in England before sailing and creating the Georgia colony? He was a member of Parliament. That's how he had the king's ear. He was able to talk, and he had a direct connection to him. You need to know, what was James Oglethorpe's primary focus while in Parliament? He had seen people die in debtor's prison. He wanted to change how the prisons worked. If you were in prison so long that you were never able to pay off your debt, and you died there because, I mean, you were just a debtor and you were in there with murderers and thieves and just horrible people, he wanted to change that. You need to know who Robert Castile is and how he inspired James Oglethorpe. You need to know the reasons for the Georgia Charter. Obviously, we've talked about that a lot. Charity, defense, and trade. You know who was placed in charge of the colony of Georgia? Georgia was a trustee colony first, so obviously the people in charge were the trustees. You need to know the reasons to colonize Georgia. They're very similar to the charter. Charity, trade, defense. What ship did the first colonists take to come to Georgia? That would be the Anne. What was the name of the ship? What ship did the first colonists take to come to Georgia? That would be the Anne. Where did the colonists first stop? They didn't come right to Georgia. They had to stop somewhere first. So their first stop was Charlestown. Where did James Oglethorpe decide would be Georgia's first settlement? He first decided that he would land at Yamacraw Bluff, and that would be where they would settle. That later developed into a larger settlement later on. Who gave them permission to settle there? Well, obviously, if it's Yamacraw Bluff, it was run or surrounded by the Yamacraw Indians. So the Yamacraw Native Americans, led by Chief Tomochichi, gave them permission to settle there. To be able to speak to the Yamacraw Indians, they had to have a translator. And that would be John and Mary Musgrove. Much more Mary Musgrove, but definitely John and Mary Musgrove. You know what Georgia Day is? This is the day that the colonists landed at Yamacraw Bluff, where they were finally established in Georgia. This is not the day they landed in Charlestown when they first came to the New World, but when they actually finally stopped at Georgia. You need to know that each colonist got 50 acres of land, they got some seeds and some tools. You need to know some of the groups who came over. You need to know that the Portuguese Jews came and they were allowed to stay because they brought a doctor. You need to know that the Salzburgers came over and that they settled in New Ebenezer, Old Ebenezer, and then moved to New Ebenezer. And they were hard workers and they were planters and they were trying to escape for religious freedom. You need to know that the Highland Scots came over and they were used or brought over to help defend the colony. You need to know about the War of Jenkins' Ear, and that it was between the English and the Spanish. You need to know that the Salzburgers settled in New Ebenezer because their land originally was too wet, marshy, and it was not allowing them to grow. And so they asked James Oglethorpe, and he allowed them to move and settle in what they now call New, what they would call New Ebenezer. You need to know that the who brought over the new doctor and why did they need a new doctor. You need to know who did Oglethorpe take with him when he returned to England. He took over Tomachichi and the Yamacraw Indians. He wanted to show them off. He wanted to show them England. You also need to know what was the final battle between Spanish and English in America. The Battle of Bloody Marsh. A battle so great that the marsh actually appeared to be bloody. You also may want to look over you also need to know who the colony of Georgia was named after. Obviously, it was named after King George of England. So these are the key ideas that you need to use to prepare for the test tomorrow. This list will also be attached underneath this video if you would like to use these questions. I will be here tomorrow at 8:20 for a help session. Good luck. I'll see you tomorrow.